something that didn't sell and read them to you. But that's the bad news. So they're there. The good news is Jim's going to organise monthly order from all of you so that you can buy stuff and then you can come and pick it up from his home, I think. St. Gabriel's, Julie Schmidt at St. Gabriel's does that. She gets an order every month, close to $1,000 usually, the big orders. And she orders them, pre-orders them, and then she comes and picks them up, takes them back, and then they pick them up from there. That saves, people individually coming to St. Nathan's. So that would be great if you could organise that, Jim. That would be a big help for us. The other thing is, Brother Isaac, who is with me this morning, has also got at the back some icons, the patronal icon of our monastery, Our Lady Searcher for the Lost. Our Lady has many titles, and one of her titles in the Eastern Church, in the visiting church, is Searcher for the Lost. It goes back to a 7th century icon in Syria, a long time ago, 7th century. And she's our patronal patroness, because we're all often get lost, don't we? And we need to be found. And so he's selling replicas of that 7th century icon at the back for $40, I think they are, about $40. And you can even bring them to the monastery for them to be specially blessed, or you can take them to your parishes to be blessed. And so he'll be manning that. He's also got our retreat schedule for the monastery. We have day retreats. I think a group came from St. Bernadette's, didn't they, Jim? Or from there was a group that you came with that came for a Saturday.
Right.
And then we also have residential retreats, like for a weekend or individually. We have 12 guest rooms individually, couples, and small groups where you can come and share our life, get spiritual direction, or the themed retreats, and Brother Isaac's got the subject at the back, the themes, and also preached retreats. So that's a very important resource that's available to you as well. Any questions about that before I start on what I'm going to speak about today? Any questions? Practical questions? Very good. Okay, let's get to the real stuff, and I will leave question time at the end, quite substantial question time, because it's better for me to speak about what you're interested, where you're at, than things that aren't all that relevant to you. But I think this morning's topic is going to be relevant to you, and that's why I'm going to leave extra time for questions and discussion. All of you are here because I am pretty sure that all of you are devout, faithful Catholics, Roman Catholics. Most of you, I suspect. But put up your hand if your children and grandchildren don't practice anymore. Put up your hand. That's quite a lot. Quite a lot. And I have, the second biggest Christian denomination in the USA after Catholics. Catholics, we are the biggest single denomination. Now the Baptists altogether, and there are of course several denominations, probably are bigger than us. But of a single denomination, Catholics are the biggest. And the second biggest are ex-Catholics. So that should tell you. I have people telling me all the time, Father, where have we gone wrong? We've sent our children to Catholic schools, we tried to be a good example to them, but they don't practice anymore. Where did we go wrong? Well, of course, you didn't go wrong. What happened was, of course, the culture around us changed so radically. Most of us, particularly some of the people even older than me, grew up in a more stable Christian culture, Christian society, and probably a Catholic ghetto, German Catholic ghetto or Irish Catholic ghetto or Italian Catholic ghetto, where we had Catholic schools, we had the parish, we had Catholic events, there wasn't so much television, the internet, and so we were able to protect our faith and know the basics of our faith to defend ourselves against challenges. The Baltimore Catechism, for example. And that's what we passed on to our children and hope that that will be enough, just like it was for us. But of course, our children grew up in a much more radically anti-Catholic and anti-Christian culture, a very secular culture, with so many influences, and the ghettos had broken down and nowhere to go to be protected and to be fed and to be educated. And so the challenges they had to face culturally, not personally, but culturally, the challenges they had to face were greater and are greater than the challenges we've had to face. And so they need more. They need more than the Baltimore Catechism to defend themselves. And by and large, unfortunately, that hasn't been done in the church and even in Catholic schools, unfortunately. We're waking up to that now. A few generations late, but I guess better late than never. So that's really important. But let's look at that in more detail, because this is going to be my topic. When you ask a lot of these ex-Catholics, and even other Christians, and even sometimes atheists, or those people that claim to be atheists, most of them, I would say 95%, will not claim to not believe in God. They won't. It's only a very, very small minority that are radical atheists. Very small. The vast majority of those people that don't come to church, I would say as 95%, and particularly the young people, the younger generation, will say to you, no, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual, but not religious. Now they're saying something that is very, very important. We are concerned in the new evangelization that the church is radically shrinking. And the church, after the Second Vatican Council, has made great attempts to read the signs of the times so that we can reach these people, the lost, that Our Lady Searcher for the Lost goes out to search for and to bring back to the church. And there's been all sorts of programs and catechesis and experiments, all sorts of theories about what to do. And yet, if we listen carefully, they're telling us what they want. They're telling us what to do. We are spiritual, not religious. And so I think in the new evangelization, not to get off the wrong foot, we have to listen. And we have to understand what they mean. And then we may have a chance of reaching them. Because I personally believe that they are absolutely right. I believe they are forcing us to be a better, more vibrant, more spiritual church. To renew ourselves, revive ourselves, and in that process bring them into the faith as well. They're doing us a great service, forcing us out of our complacency to really take our faith seriously in the new evangelization. That's the only thing that's going to work. Forget programs, forget strategies, forget committees, forget resources, forget money, forget education, forget colleges, forget Catholic hospitals. They're all part of the ghetto. I'm not saying they're not good, but they don't go deeply enough to what the real issue is. And until we face that and honestly address it, then they're not going to listen. They're going to continue to say, I believe in God. I'm spiritual, but I'm just not religious. So let's have a look a little bit more closely what they're saying when they say that. In order, before we can, and I can probably move this now, in order for us to understand a little bit about what it means to be spiritual and not religious, or what they might mean, we might begin to look at a Christian, or a good Christian, a good Catholic, what I would say anthropology. Fancy word, but just who we are as human beings. Who we are as human beings. And that might help us understand a little bit better how God communicates with us and how we communicate with God. So let's look at who we are as human beings. First of all, I want to look at what defines us as individuals. If anyone can make a suggestion, put up your hand, take a guess. What defines most basically, this is important, most basically, most immediately, who we are as individuals? Yes, Father?
Image of God.
Image of God. That's a good one, but I don't know if it's the most basic. An atheist, or someone who can claim to be an atheist, who doesn't believe in God, sees me and he knows a lot about me already. To image of God, you probably have to know someone a little bit better, something about their soul. Yes?
Our soul.
Okay, I've looked at you. I know a lot about you, but I don't know much about the state of your soul.
The ability to reason.
Ability to reason. I know a lot about you. I don't know whether you're rational or irrational. Depends who I ask, I guess. But what's the most basic? This is important. What you're saying is not wrong, but we have to look at it gradually. Yes, Jim?
Church going.
We're getting closer, but something even... I don't know. Okay. What's your name, ma'am?
Gloria.
I obviously know a lot about you, Gloria, but I don't know whether you go to church or not. Something the most basic that defines who we are. Now, women, I'm surprised women don't know this, because women spend a lot of time on this.
What we look like.
What you look like, exactly. Our bodies. Very basic. Our body, let's keep it in a singular. our body, our physicalness, whether you're tall and thin and good looking like me, or something else. Okay? So our bodies define most basically, maybe not most importantly, but most basically who we are. And this is important because our Christian faith, our Catholic faith, see, this is really important, has to be physical for it to be real. This is why for us Catholics and Orthodox, the mysteries or the sacraments are absolutely of the essence of our faith. Because the physical is important. It's the way we relate to God most immediately, most basically. We're speaking with Jim just then about fellowship and why Catholics sometimes don't emphasize fellowship, and these more evangelical churches emphasize fellowship and are able to. Most evangelical congregations are ex-Catholics, of course, because they want fellowship. And good for them, they do. And we're going to look at that. But they probably have never realized, though, that Catholicism is about the physical, because they don't have the sacraments. They've given that up. Somehow they were not taught, or it didn't get through, that the sacraments are very, very important. That's the way God reaches us. That's the way we know Him. So the physical is important. From that, of course, not only the sacraments, but I tell young people all the time, what we do with our bodies is important, because our bodies are physical. Who thinks once we die, our bodies stay on the earth and decay and forgotten, and our souls rise at the day of resurrection to be in heaven? Who thinks that? Who thinks that's Catholic teaching? Wrong. Heresy. Gnosticism. At the day of resurrection, our physical bodies, every cell, will participate in the resurrection. Every cell, every molecule, every inorganic matter, every rock will be transformed and will participate in heaven in the resurrection. We never leave behind our physicalness, ever. Periodically when we die, at least externally, but not really. We will have the same bodies for eternity in the resurrection. But thanks be to God, they will be transfigured. But they'll still be the same bodies. That is really important. This is why the physical is so important. This is why the sacraments are so important. And a lot of Christians, even good Catholics, just don't know that. And that's why they give up belief in the sacraments. That's why they think being spiritual as opposed to physical, institutional, right? They don't need the institution of the church. They're spiritual. No such thing. There's no separation. There's no such separation. We are one. This is Catholic doctrine. The separation between the spiritual and the physical is a form of heresy that's always been with the church and always comes back, called Gnosticism. It's not Christianity. Our bodies are part of the way we receive salvation and participate in God in eternity. So that's really, really important, the physical. Now, obviously, most people understand that to be religious, to be a person of faith, to be a good Catholic, you have to have some relevance to the physical. You can't be a hedonist. You can't do whatever you want with the material and claim to be a Christian. Okay? So let's go a little bit deeper now. A little bit deeper of what defines who we are. A little bit more subtle, in some sense a little bit more important too. Any suggestions? What's a little bit deeper that defines who we are as individuals? Again, I would suspect women would be better than this.
Well, I was going to say your actions or how you live.
How you live. Okay, I have met you briefly. I've heard you speak. I don't know how you live. Not very much. But I know a lot about you already. Don't I? Just by your voice, by any yes, ma'am?
Appearance?
Well, appearance is the first one. But we're going to a little bit deeper now of what defines who we are. Yes, at the back.
Personality?
Yes. Our emotional or psychological level, our personalities, whether we're happy, cheerful people, or always miserable and sad, whether we're excitable, or always very calm, whether we're often angry or we're always serene. Our personalities, who we are psychologically, whether we are very social or very unsocial, our personalities, our psychologies, our emotions, yes.
I think the children growing up nowadays are desensitized because of the media and the technology. You can't, all you got when you turn the TV on is filth. And in Psalm 119, that says, let your eyes not look at anything like that.
Correct. And we will absolutely look at that. But we have to look at it, you know, what you're saying is correct, but we have to break it down and look at it more deeply to see what we have to do. So our psychology, our emotional life is a very, and this is, they do it, you know, they do all sorts of tests they've done with identical twins who look the same. Their physical genetic makeup is the same. But they each have their own personalities, and sometimes they can be very different. So our emotions, our emotional life, our psychology is an important part of who we are. And this too has to be taken up in our faith, in worship. These days, less and less, even good Catholics go to confession to be emotionally and spiritually healed. Everyone goes to a therapist and pays thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. But not that many people go to confession. We've forgotten that the emotional and the physical is part of the way God communicates with us. Kids will often tell us, a lot of people tell us that, why don't you go to Mass? Because I don't feel anything. Right? Feelings, emotions. They've never been taught, and sometimes that's our fault too. We've never engaged them emotionally in their faith. we've often presumed that the emotions and the bodies are not important to faith. Well, I'm sorry, they definitely are. And if you don't emotionally and physically, through the sacraments, engage them in their faith, then they're going to be engaged by bad things, not by God. This is why Christian worship, Catholic worship, unlike more Protestant evangelical worship, Catholic worship has always had sacred art, sacred music, sacred architecture, to evoke emotion of attachment, of happiness, of joy, of sadness, sacred poetry, sacred literature. All those things are foreign to evangelical churches. The only thing they have is holding hands, and that's good, and maybe we need to have more of that, but it's not enough. So the emotions are very, very important in the spiritual life, because God talks to us through our emotions, through our relationships, especially on the emotional level. Kids know that. They say to us, why don't you go to Mass? I don't feel connected to God because I don't feel anything. And they're right. If we don't feel anything, then our faith isn't real. Now, that's different than saying all faith is feelings. That's a different thing. Yes, Jim? Oh, you need to chain me up again like you promised last time. I'm getting out of the screen. I'm getting too excited. Okay, so emotions. Very important. When our kids tell us, I don't feel anything, listen. Don't say to them their feelings are not important. You can say to them, and we can talk about that, yes, they are important, but again, it's not the only thing. Now, most people that would claim to be religious, and most people that would claim to be spiritual, would acknowledge that those two levels are important. Most people that are spiritual would acknowledge that what you do with your body, if you don't go around killing people, that's part of being a spiritual person. And how you relate to other people, feel compassion, is a part of being a spiritual person. But the problem is, there's deeper levels. And there's a lot of Christians, and unfortunately a lot of Catholics, even the majority of Catholics, who aren't aware of the deeper levels. Let's look at them. What's the next deepest level? Next level that's going deeper, that defines who we are. Any suggestions? It defines who we are. Going a bit deeper now. Yes?
Mind?
Our intellects, yes. Our intellects. Intellectual. Our minds. Whether we are sharp or dull, deep or shallow in our thinking, astute or not, profound, very intelligent or not so intelligent, linear or global in our thinking. All these categories define who we are intellectually. And our intellect is an essential part of how God communicates with us. He created us as intellectual beings. And in his creation, because he created us, we know something of him through his creation, including ourselves, including our minds, which are part of his creation. What Father said, in the image of God, created in the image of God. And so the imprint of God is in our bodies, in our minds, in nature, in everything. This is very, very important level of who we are. Pretty much all church teaching, the magisterium of the church, is on this level. Church dogma, particularly in areas of faith and morals, the infallible teaching of the church, Christian Catholic morality, Christian Catholic faith, the whole magisterial teaching of the church, the catechism, knowing the full catechism, the history of the church, the tradition of the church, the ecumenical councils of the church, the papal teaching of the church, the philosophical schools within the church and faith, the whole area of the intellectual formation. Now, a lot of young people and a lot of these Catholics or even Christians that will claim to be spiritual but not religious, what they're saying is, I don't know much about this intellectual and I don't care. It's not what it means to be spiritual. Or yes, it is. Yes, it is. All these three are part of what it means to be spiritual. You can't be a Catholic and not believe, and you have to know before you can believe them. You can't be a good Catholic and not know and believe the beliefs of the church. What it means to be, that's what it means to be a Catholic. It's not a club. It's an assent to these truths of the faith. You might not be able to live up to them. That's a different thing. That's about sin. That's not about heresy. It's a different thing. We all struggle on different levels. But you can be a good Catholic and be a miserable sinner. Thanks be to God. That's all right. That's the boat we're all in a way. That's what even the saints were the greatest of sinners till the day they died, except the Mother of God. So we're in good company. That's all right. But you can't be a Catholic and not believe those things. Just because you can't live up to them doesn't mean you shouldn't acknowledge the truth. Just because we can't live up to the truth doesn't mean the truth doesn't exist. We can't cut down the truth to fit our low standards. Yes, we need to, as Pope Francis says to us, we need to have mercy, we need to have compassion, we need to seek forgiveness and give forgiveness. Absolutely. But that's a very different thing than not accepting the truth. On the contrary, if we don't accept the truth, there's nothing to be forgiven for. Jesus didn't need to die on the cross. What a waste. We're not really sinners. We don't need him. Bad. Real bad. So, the intellectual is very, very important. And we have so many people there that call themselves Catholics, particularly politicians, who haven't got the faintest about what the church teaches or care. And yet, they hold themselves up as exemplary Catholics. They're not bad people, or any bad than the rest of us. They're just, though, confused, and they don't acknowledge that they're confused about the faith. You can't be a good Catholic and not know your faith. Now, when I say can't know your faith, a simple peasant in Italy 50 years ago might not have been able to read or write, but they could be a good Catholic. It's only when you go against the church, doesn't mean when you don't know. Nobody knows at all. Even, the greatest professors with 3 or 4 doctorates in theology don't know at all. Nobody knows at all. But you humbly have to say, it's the church that's infallible, not me. It's things I don't know. That's fine. The problem becomes, well, I won't mention any names, but people say, oh, the Catholic Church is wrong or outdated or really a bunch of pedophiles, and so we don't have to believe this stuff. This is all make-believe. This is all ways of oppressing women. This is all patriarchal. This is all whatever. That is dishonest. We have to accept. That's what the definition of Catholic means. To be a Catholic, we have to believe in these things. Now, conservative Catholics usually are aware of that and will tell others it's not just about the physical. You can have beautiful church, you can have a beautiful structure like this, and facilities, and programs, and schools, and hospitals that are Catholic, but aren't really Catholic, because they don't stick by the principles of Catholic teaching. And they'll also say, well, yeah, you can be emotional. Well, most conservative Catholics probably don't think the emotional is very important. It's the intellectual that's important. Well, wrong, because people are emotional. The big secret, this is the big secret. For the sake of talking, we can separate these. In reality, they are inseparable. So when you separate the physical from the emotional, from the intellectual, then you're on the wrong track. The secret is they're all important together, equally. That's what it means to be integrated in your faith. You can't just be about the physical. You just can't be about the intellectual. You can't just be about the emotional. Charismatics often very important about the emotional, not always very determined to build beautiful churches or reverent liturgies or the importance of the sacraments, the physical, or the intellectual, the doctrine and teaching of the church. Very emotional. Lots of speaking in tongues and hugging and all good stuff. But it can't be on its own divorced from the physical and from the intellectual, otherwise it ain't Catholic. Any questions thus far? Yes?
Sounds like the Trinity.
Yes, except I'm going to trip that up in a minute. So don't get too attached to that symbol.
I love your statement. Good Catholic, miserable sinner. It's possible to be both.
Not only possible, that's the reality.
Sure. But
that's why Jesus died on the cross for us Catholics.
But I think a critique of those who aren't religious would consider that hypocrisy. To be a good Catholic and leave the church and do something bad in the parking lot. You're a miserable sinner. That's a hypocrisy.
Because they don't know. They don't know what the church teaches. You know, you go out and ask someone who's a half-baked Catholic what it means to be a Catholic. They don't know. You're right, and that's our fault. We haven't taught people properly.
Couldn't that also be a challenge, a positive one, where we actually, acknowledging our sinfulness, grow in holiness and virtue?
Absolutely.
And grow closer to the ideal.
Absolutely. That we have to do both. But the worst sin in the world, the unforgivable sin, what's the unforgivable sin? What's the unforgivable sin?
Not know or acknowledge yourself.
To not acknowledge our sinfulness. Pride. That's what Lucifer felt. The worst of sins is to say, I'm perfect. Because then you say, Jesus, you didn't need to die on the cross. I don't need it. I'm already perfect. Bad. Real bad. Humility. Now, humility does not mean that this goes away. On the contrary, you can only accept our sinfulness and our humility when we accept that there are objective values, moral and matters of faith. But I don't want to get too much into that because I want to trip you up. This is what the gist of the talk is about now. I haven't got to the main part of the talk. The main part of the talk is that there is another level that is the most important, the least accessible, but the most important, that defines who we are. What is that level? What is that level?
Our senses, taste, feel, hearing.
Okay? They're physical. The senses,
Using all of it.
we use the others, but the senses are the senses of the body, okay? So it's part of it, as I say, they're inseparable. But something deeper, the deepest part of who we are, someone that hasn't had a go, yes?
Free will?
No, I would say free will is on the third level. It's the intellectual. We have knowledge and we decide what to do. We assess that knowledge and make a choice, a free choice. It's morality. Free will is about morality. Morality is on that level, moral teaching. Yes?
A personal connection with God?
That's an interesting. Say that louder.
Our personal connection.
Our personal connection with God. But don't we connect with God with our bodies?
Yes.
In the sacraments? Don't we connect with God through our emotions?
Yes.
Don't we connect with God through the teaching of the church?
Wait, the next one is in our.
Sorry?
The next one is in our heart.
In our heart.
In our being.
In our being. Good. We're getting to the what in old language would say in our soul.
Yes.
And we would say this is the spiritual, or in somewhat more Eastern Christian terminology, the church I come from, our spiritual or mystical dimension. We call the sacraments the mysteries. Now, this is really, really important. It's on this level where God speaks to us directly at the level of our souls. That is the most profound relation, where the most profound relationship with God is. And these young people have recognized that, even if we've been blind to it. They're saying to us, we are hungry for the spiritual. We are spiritual. but we're not religious, the other three levels. And all you've been giving us is the religious, the three levels, and you haven't been directing us, forming us enough on the fourth level, the spiritual level, the mystical level, the level of our souls, where God, who is outside his creation, communicates directly at the level of our soul. Now this is very, very profound. And on this level, people can say, yes, I'm a Catholic, although I do things to my body that I shouldn't, or I don't go to church, or I don't receive the sacraments. My emotional life is a mess. I don't have the faintest idea about my faith. But I'm still a Catholic. Something has occurred on this deepest level. They've had some sort of encounter with God, some sort of mystical encounter that's so profound that they will never give up calling themselves Catholic. That is a valid position. Also, even more profound, a lot of people will claim to be atheists. I'm an atheist. And yet when you look at their lives, they have hopes and fears like us. They've probably had a mystical experience, and they may even have a relationship with God, even though they don't acknowledge it. What they're saying to you is, on the intellectual level, I'm an atheist. But that's not the deepest and most profound level. If you dig a little bit further, you see they're not atheists at all. They're as religious or as spiritual as we are. This is really, really profound. And I think this is what young people are saying to us. This is really important. And our church, traditionally the Eastern churches, have emphasized this dimension more. The Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, part of Western Christianity in the Western world, and the Enlightenment and the so, has tended in the past 400 or 500 years to unfortunately marginalize this fourth level to some degree and concentrate on the third. And that's been disastrous for our faith. Disastrous. And the young people are telling us, I'm spiritual, not religious. Why have you never told me about... You mentioned the word mysticism, and even most traditional Roman Catholics think you're not speaking about Christianity, you're speaking about Buddhism or Hinduism. That's bad. It's at the core of who we are as Christians. No wonder, if we've thrown out the core of our belief, no wonder we've lost so many Catholics. They never knew what it meant to be Catholics. Even we didn't know. Now, remember, this is what we have to tell them. The four levels go together. So just because the spiritual is the most important does not mean that they can forget the rest, that the church's teaching isn't infallible. It is, intellectually, on the intellectual level. But even dogma, this is the thing, even dogma, which is an intellectual formulation of the belief of the church, is not the most profound level. We can have an encounter with God that is so deep and so profound, so all-encompassing. And let's face it, we've all had it. We just don't acknowledge it. We just haven't been taught to access it. We've all had it. That's why we're hungry for more. That's what our young people are telling us. We're spiritual, we're not religious. We want to be spiritual. We're hungry for that spiritual. But we want you to fathom the deepest part of what it means to be a Catholic and a Christian and help us access that.
Oh, Abbot, didn't the Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees of Christ's day say to him, you're spiritual, but you're not following our religion. You don't follow the rules and regulations.
Exactly. They were bogged down on the third level. They weren't miserable sinners like the prostitutes, the physical. They observed that. They weren't emotional wrecks. They were respectable, responsible people, thank you very much. And they knew the law. But in their souls, that wasn't connected. Now, this is what I tell young people. They have to hear that. It's true that we've neglected this. And we need to re-emphasize it. However, I challenge them, and we have to challenge them. We can't have this either separate from the rest. Just because we haven't gone deeply enough, which is true, does not mean the more superficial levels can be forgotten. They can't. You can't be a Catholic and say, I'm spiritual, but not believe the dogmas of the church. Impossible. The four go together. You can't, be promiscuous and claim to be a spiritual person. The four go together. That's what the problem is. When the four don't go together, then something is drastically wrong. Yes?
So then, to resolve our problem of our children not coming to church, we can just give them a book about the saints who are mystical.
Yes, but I think we have to. Yes, but we have. I think we should start explaining those four levels to them and say to them that the reality is the four of them go together. Because if we do that in the culture they grow up in, they're going to see that as this, not that. Because we live in an anti-institutional culture, right? And so they're going to interpret that as this and this. The emotional and the spiritual. Some people confuse the emotional with the spiritual. Charismatics, a lot of emotions. They think it's mystical and spiritual. Not necessarily. It might be just emotions. Nothing wrong, but not really deep enough. No, I think what we have to tell them is about the four levels and that they're inseparable. And acknowledge that in the church, in the past 300 years in the Western Church, we have neglected the fourth and the most important because it's the least accessible, most mysterious. But we've done a great injustice by forgetting that and concentrating too much on that, I believe. Yes, Jim?
Again, that's, to me, new evangelization, the importance of learning your faith, but through Scripture. What a better way of knowing your religion, knowing your faith, than through what we have here.
Absolutely. Yes.
Pilate asked Jesus Christ, what is truth? And Jesus looked him right in the face and said, I am the truth and the life.
Correct. So what was he saying? Pontius Pilate said to him, was talking to him on the third level, what is truth? Right? What is truth? It's all relative. One truth is as good as another. What did Jesus say? He didn't say to him, the truth is to believe the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, to believe the commandments. He didn't say that. He said to him, I am truth. That relationship with Christ. Mystical relationship. Spiritual relationship, because he's not physically present to us except in the sacraments. He's not emotionally present to us except in the sacraments and the teaching of the church. He's not intellectually present. We can't put Christ under a microscope and have him here and ask him. It's a spiritual relation. Absolutely. That's what Christ said. Pilate was honest. Pilate was honest. He was trying to do, but he didn't understand this. He stopped here on the third week. What is truth? Explain it to me. Jesus said, no, you're all wrong. It can't be explained. It can't be merely intellectual. I am the truth. That relationship with me. That's what the truth is. The relationship with Christ. The fourth level. It's not an intellectual truth. Now this is important and very profound. Jesus, the Holy Trinity, and we'll have to end on this. Jesus and the Holy Trinity, the second person. The Holy Trinity gives us the Holy Spirit, which is not part of God's creation. The Holy Spirit is God Himself. And God Himself, the Holy Spirit, speaks to us, sidestepping His creation into the deepest level of our souls. He gives us a knowledge of Himself. I am who am, I am the truth. That is deeper than intellectual knowledge. Now, how can I have knowledge that's deeper than intellectual knowledge? It doesn't make sense. But the intellect is a creature. And this is the beauty of this level. God relates to us and gives us a knowledge of Himself that is more direct than through His creation. That's what mystical knowledge is. It's very profound. And in heaven, we are outside creation as we know it. Still part of God's creation, but beyond these categories. It's almost completely on this level. So it's a knowledge that God gives us of Himself, and I'll give you an example, and then I'll leave you to go to shop with Brother Isaac. This is the last thing I want to leave on. It's the difference between, if I want to tell you something about myself, and I'm God, the Holy Trinity, and I want to tell you something about myself, and I write an autobiography, the creation. I created this letter that's written and gives information about me, and I give it to you. And you read it, and you know something about me. Okay? God revealing Himself to us through His creation. Those three levels. But if I come up, and I'm probably going to go out of the... That's all right, I can do it temporarily. If I come up, just touch you on the cheek like that. I have given you a knowledge of myself that is perhaps not as detailed as a letter, but it's somehow more intimate, more profound knowledge of who I am. Directly, I didn't just write a letter. I gave you knowledge of myself by touching you. That's what God does on that level. The Holy Spirit actually touches us on the level of our souls and gives us a direct knowledge of Himself that is not dependent on the letter, on the creation. It's a direct relationship with the Creator. It's very profound. You know, I give lots of talks to lots of young people, university students, 30s, 40-year-olds. And if you talk to them about those three levels, about morality, about what not to do, about their emotional life, about church teaching, they start to yawn. You tell them this stuff, their jaws drop. Why haven't I heard this before? I had no idea that this is what Catholicism is. I think that's the answer. I really do. We have to unpack that, we have to sell it, we have to unpack it and pack it again, repack it, and sell it. That's That's what we're trying to do, right, Brother Isaac? But it really, I think, is the answer. And they're telling us what the answer is. They're giving us the answer. I'm mystical. I'm spiritual, not religious. So relate to me on that level. Why haven't you told me this? This is what I'm looking for. All right, I'm sorry we've run out of time. Maybe later time I can come again and expand on this. You're able to get access to that, and you're able to go on our webpage, www.hrmonline, www.hrmonline, Initials for Holy Resurrection Monastery, and Brother Isaac's probably got the webpage in our things at the back, some sort of literature, and you can get a lot of more information on that, including an interview I did with Father Parkwar on EWT and on this topic. Thank you, Jim.
Just so everybody here is aware, all of our sessions are on YouTube, and I'm going to put the website on the board. Did you steal our pen?
Well, we don't have enough of them at the monastery. It's the Holy Spirit. That's why you see. That's the secret.